The idea is that we would actually go out, and this is in fact what they would do in Tzfas in the times of the Arizal. They would actually go out to the fields and greet the Shabbos queen. So when we say on Friday night, Lecha doidi likras kala, Pnei Shabbos nekabla, come my beloved to meet the bride, let us welcome the Shabbos. So one interpretation of this follows the Gemara, that the Kala, the bride, is Shabbos. And Lecha doidi likras Kala means that we should go to the bride and receive the face of the bride. The bride is the Shabbos queen. That is one way of interpreting it. And in that interpretation, the subject of the Kala and Pnei Shabbos Nekabla is the same. Shabbos is the Kala, and we're going towards the Kala, the bride, and we're receiving the face of the Shabbos queen. However, there is an alternative interpretation based on Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. In Shir HaShirim, it's a love story between God and the Jewish people. The Doidi, the beloved one of Shir HaShirim, refers to God, Hashem. And the Kala, the bride, is the Jewish people. So there's a cosmic marriage between Hashem and between the Jewish people. And the doidi, like for example, we say ani ledoidi v'doidi li in reference to Elul. I am for my beloved, and my beloved is for me. Even the word dod in Hebrew usually means an uncle. However, in classical Hebrew, and certainly in Shir HaShirim, it means a beloved one. In fact, you can see that in the letters itself, it's written Dalad Vav Dalad, so that bidirectionally, there is a relationship. It goes this way and that way. It's reciprocal. The love of the doid, of the beloved one, is reciprocal. So, according to the language used in Shir HaShirim, Lecha doidi is a reference to Hashem. We are requesting Hashem that he should come likras kala to the bride, which is ourselves. In other words, we are saying to Hashem, please Hashem, come towards us, come to greet the bride, because we, the Jewish people, are your bride. And if you do that, Pnei Shabbos Nekabla, then we will be able to greet the face. Whenever we use the word Pnei, it's always a reference to Pnimius, the inner dimension. The inner dimension is reflected in the face. So, for example, when we say in Birchas Kohanim, Yoyer Hashem panav elecha, Hashem should shine his face towards you, his pnimius, his inner dimension to you. Similarly over here, Pnei Shabbos is the pnimius of the Shabbos, the inner dimension of Shabbos we should be able to receive. So according to this interpretation, the first part of the sentence and the second part of the sentence is in fact two separate meanings. The first part says, Hashem, you're the beloved one. Come to us, the bride, the Jewish people, and empower us so that we should be able to receive the face of Shabbos, the pnimius of Shabbos. This interpretation is based on the Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe, and now we're going to give over the presentation as it's laid out in Likutei Torah in Parshas Bracha. The Alter Rebbe says as follows: in order to understand why we make a request on Friday night and we say to Hashem, please come towards the Kala so that we can receive the Pnimius, the face of Shabbos, we have to go back to understand the concept of Sheishes Yemei Bereshis, the 6 days of creation. It's interesting, although creation happened thousands of years ago, nevertheless, we always refer to the 6 days of the week as the Sheishes Yemei Bereshis, the 6 days of creation. In the light of the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, though the world wasn't just created then and it continues, but rather there is continual creation, which means that Hashem is pumping divine creative energy, creating the world something from nothing every single second. And if God was to withdraw that energy, chas v'shalom, even for a second, the world would return to the nothingness as it was before creation. So now we can understand why each week is called the Sheishes Yemei Bereshis, the 6 days of creation, even though creation, the first act of creation, took place many years ago. Now, creation was done with 10 utterances. Ba'asara ma'amores nivra ha'olam. With 10 utterances, Hashem created the world. So, for example, Yehi Or, let there be light. The configuration of the letters Aleph, Vav, and Resh, each letter is a figure of divine creativity. If we combine the letters Aleph, Vav, and Resh together, then we can create physical light. Now, if you count up the number of times it says, and Hashem said, you'll find there's 9 times. So Chazal say, Bereshis nami maimu, that the word Bereshis is also one of the 10 utterances. The Targum Yonason Ben Uziel translates the word Bereshis as Bechuchmasa, with Chachma. In other words, Hashem created the world with wisdom. That's echoed in Tehillim in chapter 104, verse 24, where it says, Kulam b'chachma asisa. All of them you made with wisdom. Now, most people interpret that to mean that creation is so majestic and magnificent and complex and diverse and multifarious. It must have been made by a master creator and designer, and the wisdom which was invested into it is awesome and phenomenal. Chassidus explains, however, that the investment of divine creativity into the world is in fact but an infinitesimally small fraction of God's true capability. And so consequently, it's rather like praising a mathematician, a great mathematician who knows complex algebra, that if you say, they are such a wonderful, wise person, they can even do addition and subtraction. One would never praise a great mathematician that they can know simple addition and subtraction. Similarly, when we say kulam b'chachma asisa, we mean that Hashem created the world with the attribute of chachma, meaning that the life force of the world is with chachma. Now, chachma is koyach ma, the potential for something, or the power of bittul, because bittul being nullified is represented by the word ma. As Moshe Rabbeinu said, Va'anachnu ma, what are we? So when Hashem created the world with Chachma in these 6 days of creation, similarly, we engage in the 6 days of creation in creating, in the 39 categories of malacha, of work, in shaping, refining, and elevating the world. So, just like Hashem descended into creation, in the sense that Hashem contracted infinite energies into divine, finite creative packets, and it was done with Chokhmah. Similarly, during the week, we also descend into the world, our souls descend into the world and embrace the physicality of the world in eating, drinking, sleeping, commerce, and attaching the world to the divine through mitzvah performance and Torah learning. Now, all that is brought to the fore when a person davens, when a person prays, because it's during tefillah, which is the idea of attachment, that a person meditates on Achdus Hashem, on the oneness of Hashem. There is, however, a difference between the tefillah of the weekday and the tefillah of Shabbos. During the week, as we've explained, the dynamic is that of a flow from above downwards. Energy flows down from one level to the next. In terms of the worlds, from Malchus of Atzilus down into the world of Bria, down into the world of Yetzirah, and down into the world of Asiya. The 3 worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya parallel the soul garments of thought, speech, and action. What is the difference between those 3 garments? Thought is an innermost garment. It's always attached to the soul. A person never stops thinking. Speech is somewhat detached. You only speak when you want to say something or communicate to another. However, when you're speaking, it's clearly noticeable that you are speaking. You and your speech are linked. An action, a person can actually create an item, can create an object, and that object can live and exist independent of its maker. So if a person makes, for example, a pot, that pot can exist even without the potter. And not necessarily do you see in the pot the potter. Similarly, in creation, when divine creative energy, Chokhmah, comes down into the world and comes into the world of Asiya, it attains a state of where the world itself is not cognizant of its source. It becomes a yesh, an independent, egocentric being. That's the dynamic and flow of the weekday. On Shabbos, however, it's the opposite. Shabbos is a day of elevation, of aliyas ha'olamus, of when the worlds are in an upwards trajectory of feeling the divine source. That's why malacha, work, is forbidden on Shabbos, because a person has to lift themselves up from the mundane in order to bask in the oneg, the delight of Shabbos. That's why Shabbos is called a Shabbos Lashem. Even though a person is obligated on Shabbos to have physical delight in drink and food and so on and so forth, But the primary goal of Shabbos is Torah, tefillah, and a deep attachment to Hashem, which is the true oneg, the true delight. That's what Yeshaya, the prophet Isaiah, calls v'karosa la Shabbos oneg, and you shall call Shabbos a delight. There is a beautiful tefillah which we say in the Amidah of Shabbos. We say the following: Yismechu b'malchuscha shomrei Shabbos v'koirei oneg. Those who observe the Shabbos and call it a delight shall rejoice in your kingship. Am mekadshe shavi, the nation which hallows the seventh day. Kulam yisbeu v'yisangu mituvecha. All shall be satiated and delighted with your goodness. Uvashvi rotzisa bo v'kedashtoi. You were pleased with the seventh day and made it holy. Chemdas yomim meiseh karasa. You called it the most desirable of days. Zeicha l'maaseh bereishis, in remembrance of the work of creation. So there's an interesting usage of words over here. It says, those who are Shomrei Shabbos, who guard the Shabbos, should rejoice in your kingship. And all of them should be satiated with your goodness. Now, kingship, Hashem's kingship, and Hashem's goodness are items really that are applicable not just on Shabbos, but also during the weekday. Why is it that in this prayer we specifically say that rejoicing in Hashem's kingship is designed for those who are Shomrei Shabbos, for those who guard the Shabbos? The Zohar provides a parable for this. It says, the king can be in different modes. The king can be sitting on his throne with his crown on his head. Then he's called, if you want, says the Zohar, the upper king. But when the king goes off his throne and he goes down to the house of his servants, then he's the lower king. Similarly, says the Zohar, that when Hashem descends to create the worlds, he's called the lower king. But when he ascends to his throne room and sits with his crown on his head, he's the upper king. So in our context, in the 6 days of creation, where the world feels like an independent entity, then the experience of godliness of a person during their prayer even is a contracted and limited experience, because what their experience is the lower king. In contrast, on Shabbos, when the king is in the throne room with the crown on his head, so then the ambience and experience of delight is that of being and seeing the king in his full glory. And that's the true oneg, the true delight of Shabbos. In that sense, weekdays are moments of work and Shabbos are moments of reward, in that the soul can feel godliness, and it's what we call me'ein olam haba, a taste of the world to come. Now, there's a rule in physics. Have you ever wondered how water can come out of a mountain spring? After all, water by nature always descends to the lowest place. How does the water get all the way up the mountain and come out of the spring towards the summit and then flows down? How does it get up there? What force brings it up? So we must say that there's a pressure which is pulling that water against its nature its nature is to flow downwards, but there's something which is pulling this water up in order to bring it up to the mouth of the spring. Similarly, the soul has descended down into the body. It is wrapped in a body and its trappings, and in order to raise itself upwards, to experience that Oneg Shabbos, it needs to be empowered. And now we can come back to our interpretation of Lecha Doidi. What do we say? That we ask Hashem, our Doidi, our beloved one, Hashem, Lecha Dodi likras Kala, come towards us, the Jewish people, the Kala. We are your bride, we are your mate. But during the week, Malchus, our kingship, our collective soul, the Shekhinah has descended down into the worlds, has become opaque, concealed, clouded. But now, come to us and help us raise ourselves up so that we may be elevated in order to experience the Pnei Shabbos, the Pnimius of Shabbos, the inner dimension of Shabbos. And that is the true oineg and delight that we would like to experience and bask in on the Shabbos day. But we need you to empower it. We have a similar idea expressed in Shir HaShirim, where the pasuk says, Mashcheni acharecha norutza. Draw me, after you, we will run. In fact, the pasuk starts off with a singular and ends off with a plural. Mashcheni, draw me, and after that, we will run. It's usually said in reference to Pesach and the Sefirah, the idea being that Hashem should make the first move. Mashcheni, Hashem, you draw me from above, empower me, and then we, meaning both the Nefesh Elokis, the godly soul, and the Nefesh HaBahamis, the animal soul, we will be able to run after you. Here as well, there has to be an element of Mashcheni, of Hashem drawing us from above. This is the Lecha Doidi likras Kala. We ask Hashem, please come to us, draw us out, schlep us out, raise us up, inspire us, elevate us, so that we can run after you. In fact, the word acharecha means after you, from behind. It's very different than the Pnei Shabbos, the face of Shabbos. Acharecha is the idea that we are in the back, only receiving from that which is external, whereas the Pnei Shabbos, the face of Shabbos, this is something which is internal. It's interesting that many communities actually recite Shir HaShirim before Shabbos comes in, and it's in order to bring out and express this beautiful love story between God and the Jewish people, this cosmic love story. And by reciting Shir HaShirim, we elicit by Hashem that love, and we ask Hashem to elevate us and to lift us up and to bring us to a state where Pnei Shabbos Nekabla, where we will be able to receive the Pnimius, the inner dimension of Shabbos. Now, it's interesting to note as well that the Alter Rebbe, although we don't actually do it, it's not in the Chabad Siddur, but the Alter Rebbe did in fact want to institute at one point that Shir HaShirim should also be said by Hasidim on Erev Shabbos. At the end of the day, we don't actually say Shir HaShirim. Many communities do, But the concept of L'cha Doidi Likras Kala certainly is there. So we have this idea of Hashem drawing us up, our request to Hashem. But there is a caveat. One can only make such a request, and one can only experience that elevation if one has toiled during the week. Our sages say, Misha Torach be'erev Shabbos yochel b'Shabbos. Somebody who has prepared during the weekday will eat on Shabbos. For want of a better word, we have to experience a mini Shabbos every day during the week in order that the maxi Shabbos, the macro Shabbos, should be experienced on Shabbos itself. And that mini Shabbos is, in fact, the tefillah of every single day, in which we lift ourselves up, that sulam, that ladder of tefillah, and dependent on how much we exert ourselves in the tefillah of the weekday is the elevation of Shabbos. We can describe the difference between what is experienced during the week and what is experienced on Shabbos by discussing the difference between the nevuah, the prophecy of Yeshaya, of Isaiah, and that of Yechezkel. Chazal say Yeshaya is like a person who lives in the capital city who sees the king, whereas Yechezkel is like a villager seeing the king. Both Yeshaya and Yechezkel depict the Merkava, the divine chariot. But Yechezkel's depiction is much more excited, colorful, descriptive than Yeshaya's. They're both looking at the same thing. In fact, we're told that one is looking at it as it is in the world of Yetzirah, one is looking at it as in the world of Bria. They're looking at the same thing, but one is a village boy, the other is a city dweller. What is the difference between the two? The villager is unsophisticated, primitive, never seen, rarely sees the king. And when they see the king, they become excited, overwhelmed, lose their sense of self, and the overwhelming revelation of the king dwarfs them into feelings of nothingness. In contrast, the city dweller is used to pageantry, and when they see the king, they marvel at the king's exaltedness and majesty. In other words, by the city dweller, there's an inward recognition of the greatness of the king, which not necessarily is manifest in external excitedness, whereas the villager is just so overwhelmed and excited to see the king, they're externally excited. And that's the difference between the nevuah of Yechezkel and that of Yeshaya. So we can also say the difference is that that's the difference between the weekday and Shabbos. During the week, as the Zohar says, the king is like descended to his house of servants, and in that state of the lower state of the king, it's like the villagers who see the king and they become completely nullified. Whereas on Shabbos, the king rises to his palace, crown on his head, and because the city dweller doesn't get so excited by the external, but marvels at the internal, the avodah of Shabbos is one of menucha, calm, inner, basking in the tranquility, oineg, and kedusha of Shabbos. Another way of expressing the difference between weekday and Shabbos is in terms of health and well-being. There is a verse in Shir HaShirim, chapter 2, verse 5, which says, Sustain me in exile with dainty cakes. Spread fragrant apples about me to comfort my dispersion. For bereft of your presence, I am sick with love. There is a form of spiritual lovesickness. During the weekday, the Jewish people are lovesick for Hashem. They feel their distance. They thirst. They yearn for divine proximity. There is a verse in Mishlei, chapter 13, verses 12, that says, a drawn out hope brings sickness of heart, but desire attained is a tree of life. During the weekday, there's a drawn out yearning. It's never quenched properly. Shabbos, however, is a day of healing. There's a verse in Malachi in chapter 3, verse 20, which says, but a sun of righteousness will shine for you who fear my name with healing in its rays. And our sages in Tractate Tanis, page 8b says, the sun on Shabbos is tzedakah for the poor. What that means is that during the weekday, the Jewish people are compared to a poor man who spiritually has nothing and is constantly yearning for revelation. On Shabbos, however, they're healed. They're healed with that beautiful revelation of divine oineg. And so now we can come full circle that as the weekday comes to an end and we are in shul and or at home and we are greeting the Shabbos queen. We're dressed in Shabbos clothes, in our finery, and we turn around at the end of L'Chodedi as to remember what they then did in Sfas, as to literally go out to the fields dressed in white and receive the Shabbos. We ask Hashem, L'Chodedi L'Kraskala, please Hashem, our beloved one, come to us, draw us, lift us out of our love sickness. It's interesting to note the Arizal says that the word choyle, which means a sick person, is numerically 49. And the reason is because there are 50 gates of understanding. A person who has not yet reached the zenith of understanding is sick because they always want to know more. Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Mount Nevoy because Nun Boy, there was the 50th gate of understanding there. When a person reaches that level of understanding, they're cured, they're healed. On Shabbos, a person is lifted up so that that love sickness, distance, and yearning of the week is quenched by the proximity, the embrace, the tranquility, the love, the calm, the serenity of Shabbos. L'chododi likraskala, Hashem, come to us, your bride, Pnei Shabbos Nekabla, and let us receive the pnimius, the inner dimension of Shabbos, the Oineg Shabbos, which is Me'ein Olam Haba, a foretaste of the world to come.